Hello children, it's story time again, and today is Easter Saturday, so I have started work on my Easter bonnet. What do you think? Nice little yellow flowers. It's getting there, isn't it? It's not finished yet, but I thought I would show you how I'm getting on. So today we're going to have a story about a doggy, and so we'll have the little dog as our special guest, won't we kids? There we are, you can sit there, get in there with Lamb Chop. Oh, shh, no. Right, oh, you can't see him, can you? There he is. That's a bit better. Now you can't see me. Right, let's sit him up a bit. There, up there. Where's your child? Stay there. Sit on Rabbit's leg. There we are. All right now. Right. Poor Rabbit can't see Rabbit now. Never mind. Well, what a kerfuffle. There, sit there. There we are. Now you can see all of them, especially if I move it a little bit. There we are. Now you can see everybody. Okay, so today we're going to have the story of Shadow, the sheepdog. And this reminds me of Grandpa when he was a little boy, because he used to go and stay with his grandma on the farm and all the uncles in Shropshire, and he used to play with the sheepdog. So, and he used to look a bit like that when he was a little boy. Doesn't look anything like it now, does he? Anyway, so this is called Shadow and Johnny by Enid Blyton, who wrote lots of lovely books, including Brer Rabbit. Here we are, and there they are. Shadow the sheepdog was growing up. He was now 6 months old, and it was time for him to begin his training. His master Johnny called Shadow to him. Shadow, now you must learn some lessons, said Johnny to his puppy. Jessie, your mother, has taught you quite a lot of things, but I must teach you some too. You must learn to know my whistle and come at once when you are called. No matter what you are doing, that's the first lesson I'll teach you today. We all have to learn that lesson, don't we, to come when we are called, especially when it's dinner time. Shadow listened, his tail wagging like a windmill. What an easy lesson. He already knew Johnny's whistle by heart. He knew his shout too. There was no voice in the world like Johnny's, Shadow was sure. He loved Johnny's smell too, because dogs have very good noses. They can smell all sorts of things. They can smell you before you even turn round a corner. Sometimes Shadow would find some in the yard and would spend a lovely minute following up the smell of the footprints until he came to Johnny himself. You have a sharp nose, Shadow, Johnny said to him. That's good. One day it may be useful to you if a sheep is lost. There he is talking to Shadow. Johnny took Shadow out into the fields. Shadow loved the fields because of the exciting smells everywhere. He ran about, his nose to the ground, smelling rat, mouse, hedgehog, rabbit, hare and fox. He put his head down a rabbit hole and a smell of rabbit came up. Shadow went quite mad. He began to sniff and scrape, his nose well down the hole. Johnny smiled a little and went on down the field, leaving Shadow behind. Now the puppy was to get his first lesson. There he is, looking in the rabbit hole, and Johnny's quite far away, isn't he? When he was at the end of the field, Johnny stopped. Shadow was still scraping at the rabbit hole, and Johnny whistled. Shadow heard the whistle, but how could he leave this exciting rabbit smell? Why, he might get to the rabbit in half a minute. He took no notice of Johnny's whistle and went on sniffing and scrabbling. The whistle came again, much louder. Shadow took his head out of the hole. He saw Johnny waiting for him. He wondered if he should go. No, Johnny could wait a minute till he got that rabbit, and into the hole he went again, his eager puppy head down the hole. Then Johnny shouted loudly, Shadow! Shadow! Come here! But still Shadow didn't come. He felt he couldn't leave such a wonderful rabbit smell. There's Johnny whistling him miles away. And then Johnny walked all the way back till he came to the puppy. Shadow felt Johnny's hand pull on his collar. He took his head out of the hole and looked up in astonishment at Johnny. Johnny was quite cross. What a very dreadful thing. Shadow, you heard me whistle, and you didn't come. You heard me call you loudly, and you didn't come. That's not a good dog. Poor Shadow, his tail was lost between his legs, his ears drooped. He couldn't look at Johnny. He crept after him, whining softly, the most unhappy and ashamed dog in all the world. Never, never would he put a rabbit hole before his master again. So there was him being told off, learning his lesson. When they came to another rabbit hole, Johnny stopped. "Rabbits," he said. "Rabbits, go and fetch them then." Shadow at once went to scrape and sniff at the hole, and in a trice Johnny ran down the field. He turned and whistled. He must see if the puppy had learned his first lesson. The whistle was loud and clear over the field, and this time Shadow took his head out of the hole at once and tore off to Johnny as fast as his legs could carry him. He wasn't going to be told off again. "Good dog, Shadow, good dog," said Johnny, and he patted the puppy proudly. "It didn't take you long to learn that lesson, did it? I don't believe you'll need teaching that one again." He certainly didn't. At the first sound of Johnny's shrill whistle, Shadow always bounded off to him at once. Then he was taught his next lesson, to walk exactly at Johnny's heels when he went into the town for walks. There he is with Johnny. Now, when Jim was little, and a few years ago, me and Grandpa used to have two dogs. We used to have Neddy, who was a sheepdog, like Shadow, and Katie, who was a sort of greyhound. And we used to take them for walks up the mountain. You might see photos of them. Right, so, you see, Shadow, a good-mannered dog, must walk behind his master so as not to get in his way, said Johnny, and he must always be at heel in case he is wanted. So, when I say heel to you, you must walk just there. That's it, your nose almost touching my shoe. When I take you off your lead and say, "Run, Shadow," you may leave my heels and go bounding about for a run. Shadow listened hard. He didn't much like walking just behind Johnny in town. There were so many things to see and smell there. He wanted to stop and sniff at everything. He wanted to run up to dogs he met and tell them about Johnny. But Johnny kept Shadow on his lead. If Shadow's nose came too far in front, instead of keeping to heel, Johnny would give a sharp jerk on the lead. So he learned that Johnny meant what he said. Heel meant walking just behind Johnny and nothing else. He mustn't pull on his lead and he mustn't loiter. He was a clever little dog, so it didn't take him more than 2 days to learn that lesson. So that was very good, because it might have given him a sharp jerk on the lead, but what he was doing was trying to keep him safe. And when sometimes I come to pick you up from school, Jonna, Sylvie, Florence, Elliot, whoever, then we have to stop at the road, don't we? And look very carefully and not cross until the green man says go, or until I say go. So you always have to be careful when you come to roads. And Shadow was just the same. "Now you must teach him to be on guard," Johnny said, his father. "That is important for a sheepdog." So Shadow was taught what on guard meant. It was not easy to learn that. Johnny took him into a field and put his jacket down on the grass. He made Shadow sit on it. "On guard," he said. "On guard, Shadow. You mustn't leave my jacket until I come back or until I whistle you. You are guarding it." "Woof," said Shadow happily. He liked sitting on anything belonging to Johnny. Johnny began to walk away. At once Shadow bounded after him, leaving the jacket. Johnny swung round and looked at him sternly. "Didn't I tell you to guard it?" he cried. "Bad dog, go back. On guard, I tell you, on guard." There he is, telling him off again. Poor Shadow. He took Shadow back to his jacket and made him sit on it again. Shadow's tail dropped. He didn't want to stay with the jacket. He wanted to go with Johnny. Johnny set off again. Shadow waited till he had turned a corner and then bounded after him. But no, that was not the right thing to do at all. Johnny spoke angrily to him, and Shadow was miserable. Perhaps the jacket was very important, he thought. He's starting to understand now. Have I got to take you all the way back again? Cried Johnny. I'll put you on guard, on guard, on guard. Shadow finally understood. He had to go back and stay with that silly jacket until further orders. Well, he didn't understand why, but all the same he knew he must obey. So back he went of his own accord and lay down on the jacket, his chin on his two front paws. What a good dog. Johnny went into the next field and waited a few minutes. He peeked through the hedge and saw that Shadow was really on guard this time. What a good little fellow he is, thought the boy proudly. Now I'll go back and give him a biscuit for a reward. It was hard for him to learn that lesson. He went back. Shadow saw him coming and stood up joyfully, his tail wagging wildly, because dogs wag their tails when they're happy, don't they? But he didn't leave the jacket. No, he knew that he was meant to stay with it, on guard, until Johnny came right up to him. There they are. And then it was worth being taught the lesson when Johnny fed him a delicious biscuit and patted him and told him he was the most marvellous dog in the world. Shadow rolled over on his back and put all his fat legs into the air and yelped for joy. Johnny put on his jacket. Another lesson learnt. Good dog. There they are. Shadow learnt to let Johnny take away his bone from him without growling or snapping. He learnt to track Johnny wherever he was, even when he was a mile or two away. That was really clever. Johnny would shut him up in a kennel and go off for a walk. Then, half an hour later, a farmhand would let him out and say, Now, find Johnny. Go find Johnny, Shadow. Where's Johnny? And Shadow would put his nose to the ground and run wildly about until he found a fresh footstep of Johnny's. Then off he would go, like an arrow from a bow, smelling Johnny's track without a mistake. Over field and hedge, ditch and stream he would run, and at last he would find Johnny, hidden up a tree or in the heather. There, he's found Johnny. Good dog, you've only taken 10 minutes this time, cried Johnny. Do you like your lessons, Shadow? You learn them quickly enough. Soon you must go off with the other sheepdogs and learn how to round up the sheep. I guess you'll be the cleverest sheepdog Daddy's ever had on the farm. You will try hard, won't you, Shadow? Woof, said Shadow, licking his master's hand over and over again, because dogs are a bit licky. He was excited to hear he was to go with the big dogs. He would show them how clever he would be with the sheep. There they are. That's the end. And I've just remembered, that when I used to read this to Jim, he used to want me to use different names in it. So Johnny had to be Gareth and the sheepdog had to be Neddy. But I would read it and I would go, his master Gareth called Neddy, Johnny. And I used to get all mixed up. So I didn't want to do that to you this time. So today it was Shadow and Johnny and not Gareth and Neddy, who are two different people. Anyway, Gareth is your grandpa, of course, and he's going to make my dinner today, so I'm going to see how he's getting on with it. So let's have a little play. What shall we play today? Twinkle, Twinkle again, I think. I was nearly there with that one. Goodbye, children. Goodbye, little doggy. Goodbye, lamb chop. Good rabbit. I don't know what I forgot to say. Did you sit comfortably? Did you behave yourselves? I hope you did. Night night.